For those of you who are already logged on, if someone wanted to do me a favor, we wanted to test out the chat function. So if you could just send me a test in chat, and my name is Deidre, and I just wanted to test it and see if it works okay before we actually get started. So just direct message me. My name is Deidre. Perfect. Thank you. Great. So that function works perfectly, and it looks like we're on track then to get started. Good morning. We will start promptly at 10 o'clock. I just wanted to make sure and remind everyone to mute their lines. We are going to mute all, but as an extra precaution, when you join, please just hit mute on your computer or phone. If you're going to mute via Zoom, there is at the very top in the middle, if you run your cursor over the top, there is a sign that looks like a microphone. And to mute, all you have to do is just click it, and it will turn it red and put a line through. So if you need to do that, please do so. Also, the chat function will be utilized during the call or during the webinar for any questions. Again, thank you for joining early, and we'll start promptly at 10 o'clock. He'll be in the office. The office to call back and Good morning. It is 10 o'clock, and we're going to give everyone just maybe one more minute to join. Again, we are going to mute all, but for some reason, there's a few people that I'm not able to mute. So if you could please mute your own line, either if you're on the phone, mute the screen. Good morning. Thank you all for joining today. Today's webinar is going to cover basic motivational interviewing techniques for the community health workers, and the topic of discussion includes stages of change, motivational interviewing strategies, and harm reduction. Our presenters today are Veronica Presnell and Kaylin Rathburn-Smith. Veronica has years of practice as a master's level social worker, and Kaylin is finishing a MSW/MPH program at the University of Michigan. They both bring experience and academic knowledge about motivational interviewing that will help to inform how community health workers can use motivational interviewing effectively. Also, you will be muted during the training. Again, please additionally mute yourself just to have an extra precaution. We will have time for questions at the end. Please type all questions in the chat box, and I will collect them and we can discuss them at the end of the training. In order to get a certificate for one MSHWA CEU, you must stay in the meeting at least 45 minutes and complete the post-session survey no later than August 26th by 5 p.m. The survey will be emailed to everyone. I've already done that, but if you have not received the email from me, my name is Deidre. You should have got the invite from me. Please let me know, and I'll make sure and get you the survey link. Due to the large class size, certificates of completion will be emailed to you, but give us some time and look for them sometime around August 30th. If you register other CHWs at your organization, we may not have received their email, so make sure that that they contact us. If you didn't get an email from us, you can email Veronica at presnell@med.umich.edu if you don't get the survey. That said, we will send the presentation out to everyone who registered, and eventually a video of this recording will be posted on our webpage. It may not be up until September, but CHWs who were not able to join us today will have the opportunity to watch the webinar for credit. However, they will have a more detailed post-training quiz to complete. Reminder, you will be muted during the training. We'll have time for questions at the end, and please type all questions in the chat box. With that, I would like to welcome Veronica and Kaylin as our presenters today, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to them.
Okay, so I just wanted to formally introduce myself. I'm Kaylin Rathburn-Smith. I'm one of MSHWA's interns, and I'll let Veronica say hello as well.
Hello and good morning. My name is Veronica Presnell, and I'm a master level social worker, and I've used motivational interviewing throughout my career as a social worker, and we are excited to share some tips and tricks on using motivational interviewing so that you are successful with helping your clients through the stages of change as well.
So Deidre already briefly touched on the objectives of today's presentation. We're going to briefly cover stages of change. We're going to cover some strategies used in motivational interviewing, which include ORs. We're also going to touch on harm reduction, the CHW Code of Ethics, which you may not have gotten in previous motivational interviewing training, but we wanted to introduce some new things in case that would be helpful to you. So we're just going to jump right in and start with the history of motivational interviewing. It was originally created for substance abuse clients by Miller and Rolnick. Thus far, there have been 3 editions of the practice. First one was introduced in 1991, and it solely focused on substance abuse clients, and it described, the core attitudes and beliefs of the approach. Later, in 2002, they introduced the second edition, and it kind of described the spread of motivational interviewing to other areas beyond substance abuse. So it introduced it into healthcare, mental health, prisons, and school settings. And then lastly, the most recent version, which is the one we're going to be working off of today, was introduced in 2013. It further expanded motivational interviewing, and it introduced new ideas such as the 4 processes of motivational interviewing, And we're going to cover those later in the presentation.
So the definition of motivational interviewing, that is a collaborative conversation style for strengthening a person's own motivation and commitment to change. And as we go through these slides, we want you to stay in tune with the focus of collaborative conversation.
And I will say there are multiple definitions of motivational interviewing. One we chose to introduce you today is the most simple one. There's also a practitioner definition, and there's a more technical definition, which is pretty long. And we will share that with you guys when we send out the presentation. It'll be in the notes section. So we're just going to start with the stages of change. Motivational interviewing is known to help people work through the stages of change, so we wanted to briefly cover the concept again. So starting with pre-contemplation, this is when someone has no intention of behavior change anytime soon. People are pretty unaware that their behavior is problematic or produces negative consequences, and people are really thinking about the cons of behavior change versus the pros of it. Next is contemplation. This is when people intend to start a healthy behavior soon, but they're still weighing the pros and cons of changing that behavior, and they do carry a slight ambivalence towards changing that behavior, but they do intend to start changing behavior soon. So determination, which also can be called preparation, this is when people start making small steps toward behavior change, say like in the next 30 days, and they now believe that behavior change will lead to a better life. Then we have action. This is when people have recently changed their behavior and they intend to keep moving forward with that change. Along the way, people can modify the behavior or add new healthy behaviors. And then we have maintenance, which is when people have sustained this behavior for a while, about 6 months, and they intend to maintain that healthy behavior change. It's also known as relapse prevention. We didn't go in depth into relapse here just because it's not introduced in all stages of change models, but we did want to touch on it because it's obviously a reality for many clients. So the spirit of motivational interviewing is kind of like the foundation, and we want you guys to keep this in mind as we move forward with the presentation. It's partnership, acceptance, compassion, and evocation. So now we'll go a little more in depth into these. So the first one is partnership, and so, motivational interviewing is done for and with the person. You're really trying to activate the client's own motivation and resources for change. You want to express interest and support rather than trying to persuade or argue the client. And don't get caught in the expert trap. You don't want to assume you're supposed to have the answer to any or all of client problems. And of course, be aware of your own values and agenda when you're having a conversation about change with the client. Second one is acceptance, and there are 4 A's associated with this concept. So the first one is absolute worth. This means everyone deserves respect. You don't get to decide who does and does not deserve respect. Second one is accurate empathy. So this is different than sympathy. Don't pity the client, but do have an active interest in understanding their internal perspective about the change they're trying to go through. The third one is compassion. So you really want to seek and value the well-being of others, including your client, promote their welfare, and do remember that you don't have to suffer with the client to show compassion, and this kind of speaks on some boundary issues which we will touch on later in the presentation. And then the 4 is evocation, and this is really just the belief that people already have the resources they need to change. So the idea is that the client already has what they need, and together as a team we will find it and focus on their strengths, not their deficits.
Okay, now that we have discussed the spirit of motivational interviewing, let's talk about language. As community health workers, you are oftentimes linking clients to supportive services as well as supporting clients as they participate in services. A powerful tool used by professionals is the skill of listening. Listening will assist community health workers with bridging the gaps between other helping professionals and the clients throughout the change process. Miller and Rolnick identify helpful cues embedded in the client's language that can assist you with identifying where they are at in regards to the stages of change. These cues are labeled as preparatory change talk, mobilizing change talk, sustained change talk, and ambivalence. Now, it's our hope that when we go through these slides, you do not become overwhelmed as we review the different cues of change embedded in language. Instead, we encourage you to remember the spirit of motivational interviewing and use these resources as a tool to strengthen your listening skills. Okay, now the first is preparatory change talk. Within preparatory change talk, you may hear the client have a desire, which will say, I want to stop smoking. You may also hear cues that they're ready for change when they say, I can fix a bike, an example. When they use cues that signal reasoning, they would say, I would probably see better. Next in the preparatory change concept, you may hear clients say, I need to lose weight. These are all signals that we want you to hear and listen for to signal that the client is thinking about change. The next type of change talk is called mobilizing change talk. Now, these signals move you toward resolution in favor of change. So you may hear phrases that sound like they're committed. They may say, I want to quit smoking. Or activation, I'm willing to quit smoking. Or you may hear them make stances showing that they're willing to take steps. And they may say, I only smoke 1 cigarette today. So that shows that they actually started moving towards change. Okay, next we're going to talk about another concept that you may see and hear when you're working with clients. They may appear to have ambivalence. Ambivalence is a normal step on the road to change. You will typically hear individuals express both pro-change and counter-change arguments when demonstrating ambivalence. What this means is they may have a pulling going back and forth where they want to change, but they're in their mind, they're thinking of ways of why they shouldn't, or they're not willing to start working towards change. When you hear this in clients, you want to pay particular attention to your personal desire to change the individual. Instead, continue to listen for change talk and not get ahead of the client. And we'll later talk about ways that you can help clients through this ambivalence. And one approach is repeating what they say, but also incorporating and reminding the client of the goal they chose and the reason that they're seeking out your help. That will help them rethink the reasons that they should continue to move towards change, or maybe they may have identified a different direction in which they want to go. Okay, the next talk is sustained talk. Sustained talk is another type of language we want you to listen for. You will start to feel the client pulling back through their use of language, and the client begins to make arguments towards change. Again, we want you to pay close attention on how you are processing this information. Are you becoming frustrated with the client? These are some type of things that you may hear through sustained talk. They may say, I just love smoking and how it makes me feel. Or they may say, I've tried it and I don't think I can quit smoking. Or they may say things such as, smoking helps me to relax. Or I have to smoke. I can't get through the day without it. And even through commitment, where we talked about where they were ready to start actively working towards change, you may hear through sustained talk that I'm going to keep on smoking. That's an action, but it's moving away from their original goal of wanting to quit smoking. Activation. I'm prepared to accept the risk of smoking, taking steps. I went back to smoking this week. Again, we want to encourage you to pay close attention to how you're feeling. And if you're becoming frustrated, this may be a sign that the client is feeling ambivalent toward their desired change. Now we're going to move on to discord. Resistance has been replaced with sustained talk. So in the beginning,
In earlier versions of motivational interviewing, this was often pegged as resistance, and they decided to go away from that word, and they actually didn't give a reason why. They just said they didn't like it. So now we're talking about sustained talk instead and introducing discord.
mm-hmm. And what discord is not so much of the client, it's really towards the clinician or the community health worker on how you feel towards the client. So when a client is facing ambivalence, which is the same thing as sustained talk, when they're going back and forth with their decision of moving through with change, pay attention to how you're thinking. That's the discord. And sometimes what happens is the discord breaks down the communication between the community health worker and the client. And so that was one of the reasons why the Miller and Rolnick chose to use the word ambivalence instead of resistance, because it was used as a sign of blaming the client. Okay, and again, remember, discord is about you and not about the client. Understanding the discord is a natural characteristic of ambivalence. This understanding will assist you and the client throughout the change process. Some of the key characteristics of discord is defending. Defending, it may show up as blaming. It's not my fault. Minimizing, it's not that bad. And justifying, what I'm doing makes sense. Or you may see the client squaring off. They may take an oppositional stance, they may say things to you like, you don't care about me. Who are you to tell me what to do? And you have no idea what it's like for me. Or other times, the client may seem disengaged. The client may seem to be inattentive, distracted, or ignoring you. They may change the subject or gaze at the clock. So also, one way of discord is to recognize your own contribution. Remember, discord may arise from your mood, not using a collaborative approach. You having all the answers and telling the client what they should do. And again, we just encourage you to remember the spirit of MI, which is partnership, acceptance, compassion, and avocation. Remain honest with the client and mindful of your limitations throughout this talking process. Your honesty will assist with building rapport and engaging the client.
So the 4 processes of motivational interviewing, we talked about it briefly earlier. It's really just a good structure to keep you focused and to remind you why you're having a conversation with a client. So the first one is engaging, and this is what it sounds like. You want to establish a helpful connection and working relationship with your client. Don't feel pressured to do this in a certain amount of time. It varies based on the working relationship you have with your client. It could take, a day. It could take a few months to engage properly with a client. But you really want to focus on building that rapport. Second is focusing. This is just deciding what your agenda is. You're figuring out what the client came to discuss, what the problem at hand is. And once you figure that out, you want to develop and maintain a specific direction in your conversation about change. The third one is evoking. So this is when you're really harnessing the client's own ideas and feelings about why and how they might make this change in their life. And you want to have your client voice their own arguments for change so that they feel like they have control over that process. And the fourth is planning, and this is when motivation reaches a threshold of readiness. The client is developing commitment and formulating a specific plan of action. And you should revisit planning from time to time because things change along the way. And we did want to drop in SMART goals in here. You may not always use SMART goals with clients, but it is a good thing to keep in mind. And if you are on a care team with a client, don't forget to involve other providers when you are designing SMART goals because they can have insight into what that goal should look like. Next, we're going to look at some strategies for motivational interviewing. This is ORS. You guys have probably heard of this before, but we wanted to do a review of it and give some more examples of each aspect. First is open-ended questions. So these often begin with how, what, or tell me about. The whole point is to not elicit a yes or no answer. These are good for getting more information from a client. So some examples are, tell me about your last assignment, what have you tried before to make change. And important here is try to avoid the phrase why. It can sound discouraging to a client. It can sound rude. There are instances where it's appropriate, but you should really have established working relationship with a client before you use the phrase why. You don't want to risk questioning them in a negative way. The second one is affirmations. So this is really acknowledging and validating what a client says to you. You want to make sure you're sincere about it. Some examples are, you're very courageous to be so open about this. I appreciate how hard that must have been. And again, make sure you're sincere about this. You don't want it to come off as condescending. You really want to acknowledge and validate what they said. The third one are reflections. So this is really just checking in with the client throughout the conversation to make sure you're understanding what they're saying to you and making sure you guys are on the same page. You can also use them to further explore problems and feelings. These are statements, they are not questions. Examples include, it sounds like you, ... and then, you could give like a verbal bullet-pointed list of what they just do to make sure you guys are on the same page. Some phrases you should try to avoid are, do you mean, or what I hear you saying is. This can come off as patronizing, and of course we don't want to be patronizing towards our clients. You want to just essentially summarize what they told you throughout the conversation. So summaries really aren't much different than reflections. I know people often get confused on the difference between these two. The main thing is summaries should come at the end of the conversation. They should wrap things up. And it's really you reflecting back everything that they have said to you in the conversation from the beginning to the end. So some examples could be, here's what I heard, tell me if I've missed anything, or let me see if I understand so far. So the difference really is summary should be used at the end and reflections can be used along the way throughout the conversation. So we're going to briefly touch on harm reduction. Not every community health worker necessarily has an opportunity to do harm reduction, but we thought it would be important because when you're having conversations using motivational interviewing with clients, the opportunity could present itself. So we're going to use a case study about Alex to kind of highlight some examples of how you could do some basic harm reduction with a client. Alex is a 35-year-old male. He identifies as gay. He often exchanges sex for drugs or money. He injects both heroin and cocaine, and he's homeless and sleeps in an alley near a fire station. So some of the obvious risky behaviors that Alex is participating in are exchanging sex for drugs or money, injecting heroin or cocaine, and sleeping in an alley. So some harm reduction with him could be always using a condom when having sex. So as a community health worker, you could point him to where he can get free condoms. Another one would be always using clean and new needles when injecting. And as a community health worker, you can tell him where to get those. And then instead of sleeping in an alley, he could sleep in a shelter or at least sleep in a warm abandoned house. And as a community health worker, you can help him find those resources. So the main point of harm reduction is you want to respect your client's priorities and wishes. Their priorities may not be what you would like them to be, but you still have to respect where they are at in their stage of change. And not all problems have one solution, and the solutions you come up with are not going to be defined as 100% risk-free. So try to avoid thinking that your solutions are going to be pretty and perfect, because they're not. It's really just about getting that client to a safer place that they feel comfortable in, and not pushing your priorities on them. And we're going to share this full case study with you guys so that you can see kind of how this resource laid out all of his risky behaviors and all of the harm reduction that they came up with. So you'll be able to see that full case study when we share it.
Okay, this brings us to Code of Ethics for Community Health Workers. The Code of Ethics is a framework for discussing ethical issues facing the profession. It also promotes excellence towards quality of service and diligence to provide accurate information. It's based upon principles that promote social justice, positive health, and dignity. And ethics is about doing what is morally right. Codes of ethics aim to standardize professional behavior and accountability. They are designed to inform clients and the public about the types of services they can expect to receive from the professionals and to ensure that clients are protected from inappropriate conduct or abuse from professionals. Okay, and also laws are established by government. We want to make this clear that with the laws are established by government to prevent and punish behavior that is harmful or destructive to a society's well-being, whereas for community health workers, if you do violate the code of ethics, it can probably impede on you working in the profession. It can hurt your credibility or your reputation. So, and then also some of the violations can also go back into legal ramifications as well. Okay, there are the first article of the Code of Ethics is responsibility in the delivery of care, which promotes honesty, confidentiality, scope of ability and training, quality of care, referral to appropriate services, legal obligations. Article 2, I'm just going to go through the different aspects addressed in the Code of Ethics. So, and we'll send you out a copy so you can read it in more detail. But Article 2 addresses promotion of equitable relationships, cultural humility, maintaining the trust of the community, respect for human rights, anti-discrimination, client relationships. Article 3 addresses interactions with other service providers, showing how you show cooperation, conduct, self-presentation. Article 4 is about professional rights and responsibilities, and it discusses continuing education, advocacy for change in law and policy, enhancing community capacity, wellness and safety, loyalty to the profession, advocacy for the profession, and recognition of others. Then we're going to go into professional boundaries. Establish and maintain appropriate professional boundaries protect CHWs as well as clients and communities they serve and the programs and agencies they represent. It is an ethical duty related to Article 2 of the Code of Ethics. And Article 2, again, states promotion of equitable relationships. Okay. Now, maintaining boundaries, boundary crossing. Boundary crossing is when physical contact, romantic, or sexual involvement is with a client. CHWs when they self-disclose or give personal information with the client of themselves and managing a dual or multiple relationship with clients. Okay, and we'll just touch a little bit on each. So one of the things that I want to talk about is an example of managing dual or multiple relationships is that a client may be a former coworker, neighbor, or a family friend, or a member of your church or synagogue. And you have to understand the ethics of working with someone in that close capacity because they may not feel comfortable with sharing detailed information and they may not tell you that. So we want you to be very aware of that. And also self-disclosure sometimes can lead to judgment, where you may self-disclose and then the client may feel uncomfortable to just self-disclose because they feel that your choice on how you did things will make them feel like they're being judged. But sometimes you can self-disclose in the fact that you may say, as an example, I have HIV. Then if that client that you're working with has HIV, that may open the door for them to feel comfortable to talk about it because they feel that you understand what they're going through. But if you go through and tell detailed information about your status, then that's when you're crossing boundaries, and that's very inappropriate. So that moves on to self-disclosure. We want you to take caution and care and really self-reflect. And you may have to sometimes talk to another peer or your supervisor about the appropriateness of self-disclosure. So will it harm or benefit the client is the key. Also, maintaining boundaries is found in your scope of practice. We want you to make sure that you understand your skill set, your services that you provide through your agency, and what you're able to do as a community health worker. There's not really fine guidelines as far as what community health workers do, and that's an ongoing process. So skills touch bases with your supervisor to help you determine what your skill set is, and because you do not want to cross boundaries. An example is about medication. You do not want to give medical advice. Instead, that's an opportunity to link the client to a medical professional to seek out that information. And then if the client is apprehensive, then you can go back and start using some of the motivational interviewing techniques to understand why the client is apprehensive about meeting with their physician, and you can help them work through that situation.
So just kind of wrapping up, these are some tips and tricks to motivational interviewing. I'm not going to read all of these statements, but they are good ones to help you self-reflect on whether or not you're doing motivational interviewing correctly. We pulled this straight from the latest edition of Miller and Rolnick's Motivational Interviewing Guide. And if you ever have a chance to get your hands on that book, it's a great read. It's simply done, user-friendly. We really enjoyed reading it and using it to create this presentation. So continue to do your research on motivational interviewing, get as many trainings as you can on it. I know we've both been to multiple, and all of them have been useful. Everyone does a little different. This is a resource slide. These are in no way exhaustive of all the motivational interviewing resources out there. We just thought they were especially applicable to community health workers. And so start at those and continue to do your own research on it. And we thank you for joining us. And we hope you got something out of it today.
Thank you.
So perfect. This is the opportunity. We wanted to leave a lot of time to make sure that you could ask all of your questions, work through maybe if you're having a particular challenge and you wanted to talk about how using motivational interviewing would help. So at this point, if you want to talk, I can unmute you and you can just chat in the text box that I can unmute you, or you can text your question directly in the chat box. So Stephanie writes that I missed part of the meeting. Will it be recorded somewhere? Yes. In order to get credit for participation today for one CEU, you would have had to be on the call for 45 minutes, but there will be a recorded webinar available late September. And someone would like to know, repeat the name of the book. Kaylin, do you know the name of the book?
Yeah, it's by Miller and Rolnick, Rolllinck. I believe it's motivational interviewing.
It's motivational interviewing, helping people change.
Yeah. And you can find it on Amazon. It's got like a purple cover with some like rainbow underneath. There are also different editions of it that focus on like specifically healthcare settings and other settings. So it's kind of up to you on what you think is most applicable to your role as a community health worker and the job that you do.
Yeah, and we can also make sure and include that into the email that we send out with the presentation. There are a lot of people just saying thank you, and they love the presentation. And there's a question about the slides. Yes, the slides will be sent out with additional information that was discussed in the presentation. And there, in terms of CEUs, what happens is that you have to complete the survey that was emailed to you this morning. If you didn't get it, just let us know. And once you complete that survey, we will mail out, or not mail, physical mail. We'll email a certificate to you sometime later in this month. Getting a few more questions. Okay, someone said they didn't get the survey. Again, if you registered, you should have gotten it, but you could also email us so I can follow up with you if you didn't. It looks like there's a few people. So again, if you didn't get this email from me this morning, please email Veronica. Veronica, can you give us your email address?
Mm-hmm. It's Fresnel, P as in Paul, RESNALL @med.umich.edu.
Okay, so again, if you didn't get the email from me this morning, just email Veronica. So got a few more things coming in. Oh, someone said, can you repeat the email address? One more time.
Fresnel, P as in Paul, RES as in Sam, N as in Nancy, ALL @med, M as in Mary, ED as in David, .umich.edu.
Okay, and I'm also going to copy her email address and place it here. So it's also posted there. What about content? I want to make sure that everyone is good with the content of it. Does anyone have maybe an example that they would like to discuss where motivational interviewing would have helped them with a particular client? Of course, you need to maintain confidentiality. And while you all are thinking about that question, someone wrote, are there any forms or resources that could be used along with the patient that include MI, for example, health activation plan or questionnaires? Often CHWs may have to create their own.
Miller and Rolnick don't really offer any. I'm sure there are some you can, again, either create or find on the internet.
Can she give clarity on her question? So you're asking, okay, can you give a little bit of clarity on what you're asking? Or repeat the question.
Okay, I'm going to unmute Mari Cruz. I'm going to unmute you if you would like to ask your question. Let me just find you here.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
For the presentation.
Okay, you should be unmuted now.
Hey, can everyone hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Great, thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for providing this opportunity to learn more about motivational interviewing. I just had a quick question. Often when CHWs are working in certain programs or just trying to initiate that conversation with their patients, they may implement motivational interviewing to create that connection. I just wanted to know if there was a form or any resource that could be used along with the patient as they create a health action plan, other than what we would know already as a CHW, but I didn't know if there was an actual form or paper that included MI within um, creating that conversation or filling out the form.
No, it's not an actual form. Actually, with motivational interviewing, it helps you become a partner with the client in your conversation. And it's really a tool about language more so than something that you would. So it's kind of like something that if you keep doing it over time, it becomes a way of how you listen and help people go through their stages of change. For instance, what type of community health worker are you? What type of work do you do?
So it's more connecting individuals or CHWs with those tools and resources. So a lot of questions that I've had from CHWs, especially if they're starting off from scratch, is how do I take that participant or patient along with the process? But I think you covered that answer, or you covered the question.
Yes, so if you can refer back to the slides or also the book that we were talking about, it's basically just being mindful of listening to what the client needs. And if they're kind of like, like I was making an example about the smoking, I don't want to quit smoking, don't get discouraged and take the burden of the client doing what they said and saying, oh, I'm not a successful community health worker because I couldn't get someone engaged. Instead, repeat it back to them so you're allowing the client to self-reflect. So it's basically just teaching how to listen and how to give it back to the client so that the client can further process it through open-ended questions. That's basically what it is. I mean, it's a practicing tool. You have to keep practicing it.
And Lenny said that he has a I'm not sure if Lenny is male or female. So Lenny has a document that they can share. Male, okay. Thanks, Lenny. So he has a document he can share, and if he'll email it to us, and then we'll send it out to everyone. Do you want me to unmute you, Lenny, so you can talk a little bit about the document? One second, I'll unmute
Great,
Lenny.
thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Lenny, you're unmuted.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So I've been doing this particular job for several years now, and you're right, we do have to kind of create our own documents. But this is an excerpt from the book you mentioned. It's about a 9-page excerpt that will save you $50, so that you don't have to purchase the entire book. But it basically is in a nutshell. It's 9 pages, and it talks about each step, why we do each step, questions and examples, sample questions to do each step. And if I can find some additional documents, I will also send it to you via that email that you just sent out. But we are our best resources to kind of tap each other, So I service 21 counties, and I probably have 200 to 300 people on my caseload as a supervisor for what I do. So feel free to, reach out. I don't know if we have access to each other's email, but I can provide that anyway for anybody who needs information.
Great. That's a great resource and a great tool. Thank you so much.
No worries.
Also, this speaks to the need to be part of the CHW network as well, because we want to make sure that these resources that if they're created in one area of the state, we need to share and make sure that everyone can access them. So we really appreciate that, and we'll make sure and get it out to everyone. Other questions about motivational interviewing or even other success stories? Because learning from each other is definitely one of the best ways to learn from others who are practicing CHWs. Okay, well, this was a great activity today. We really appreciate all of you joining the call and the webinar. Steps moving forward, please complete your survey. If you didn't get it, again, email us and we will send it out to you. We will also send out resources that were talked about on the call today and also a copy of the PowerPoint. Please, if you have any questions, concerns, thoughts, or comments, Mishwa is always there to help and support CHWs. So enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you again for participating.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm just gonna ask a quick question.
Oh, did someone have a question? We haven't hung up yet.
Yeah, who do I look for the email from for the survey?
It'll come either from Veronica or myself, Deidre.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Have a good day.